Do you think jealousy is a modern-day ailment? I thought so too, until I made this video. We were wrong, and now I'm going to take you 50,000 years back to a campfire to prove it to you. There, a woman, just like you did this week, is fixated on a pair of eyes that's been staring at her partner a little too long. No phones, no apps, but that feeling of unease is still right there in your chest. Thousands of years later. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss videos like this that delve into human nature. You've probably been told your whole life that jealousy is a modern-day ailment, a byproduct of social media apps, a species that's become too comfortable and started inventing problems for itself. According to this view, since ancient people's sole purpose was survival, no one cared who was flirting with whom or chatting with whom. Food was shared among them, and jealousy was considered a luxury no one could afford. This was a complete misconception, and the real truth, more surprising than you might think, is ancient and deeply rooted. Let's start with a man named Napoleon Shangyan, an anthropologist who spent years among the Yanomamö tribe in the Amazon basin, beginning in the 1960s. He had set out to study what is called jealousy. He was documenting patterns related to kinship and tension, but what caught his eye, and what he noted repeatedly in his field notes, were the men watching their wives, men who followed them wherever they went, men who confronted other men over a glance that lasted barely a second. Shangyan eventually discovered that a large portion of the intense conflicts he had recorded stemmed from just one thing. It wasn't competition over mates, food, or land. It was entirely jealousy. Now let's rewind this story a bit further, way back to a time before agriculture, even before permanent settlements, to the world of small hunter-gatherer groups where our species spent roughly 95% of its existence. You might assume there was no room for jealousy in that world. Everyone shared their meat, shared their shelter. Of course, they would share their partners without hesitation, but they didn't. In a long-term study of the Aché people in Paraguay, anthropologist Kim Hill and Magdalena Hurtado documented a recurring phenomenon they termed spouse-guarding behavior. At certain times, men would become unusually close to their partners. If another man approached, there would be subtle changes in their body language, but it wasn't always that subtle. There were prolonged arguments and cold silences. The Aché people weren't performing some contrived social ritual. They were doing something that appeared to be deeply instinctive. The same is true for the Hadza tribe in Tanzania, one of the last groups in the world to live in a way that most closely resembles the original hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Researchers studying the Hadza tribe found that men who suspected their partners of infidelity changed their foraging patterns. They wouldn't stray far from camp and would appear unexpectedly. All their daily rhythms, shaped by tens of thousands of years of the struggle for survival, were being reshaped by a single emotional trigger. I want you to think about what this means. In a world where hunting carries real physical risk, and every hour spent away from camp is so crucial, men were reorganizing their entire days because of jealousy. This isn't some trivial cultural quirk. It's a signal deep within the structure of our brains. So where does this brain structure come from? This is where evolutionary psychologist David Buss steps in. In the 1990s, Buss conducted a study across 37 cultures on 6 continents, from Zambia to China to the United States, and asked a deceptively simple question. Which scenario upsets you more? Imagining your partner having a physical moment with someone else, or imagining your partner being emotionally attached to someone else? The results were perfectly split down the middle. Men from every culture included in the study reported feeling more distress in the physical scenario. Women, on the other hand, said they felt more distress in the emotional scenario. Buss's explanation stretches back from ancient times to deep prehistory. In a world where DNA testing hadn't been invented and verifying paternity was impossible, the worst thing for a man was to unknowingly father another man's child. For a woman, the worst-case scenario was her partner's emotional attachment shifting to someone else, causing him to take his resources and protection away from her and their children. 2 entirely different fears, born of 2 different survival pressures, but in the end, as you may have noticed, both lead to the same emotion, jealousy. If this Buss study helped clarify something for you, leave a like. YouTube helps it reach More people. And here's what surprised everyone. This wasn't a trait unique to humans. This behavior is also observed in meadow. Voles, small rodents that form bonds with their mates, are possessive of their partners and never fail to exhibit protective behavior. It's also seen in some primate species where males violently chase off rivals after the female's fertile period. This internal mechanism predates language. In fact, let me put it this way. It's older than fire, and I'll go even further. It might be older than the human brain itself. Just as evolution repurposes nearly everything that's useful, it has borrowed and repurposed this as well. Another factor at play here is hormones, a hormone you've probably heard of in a completely different context, oxytocin. It's sometimes called the bonding hormone. It's the hormone released when closeness and bonds are formed. Researchers who have studied animals with pair bonds discovered that oxytocin doesn't just create warmth toward a partner. In some species, this hormone appears to increase aggression towards strangers who threaten that bond. The same chemical that brings two people closer together can also be the chemical that triggers a defensive response against anyone from the outside who gets too close. The sense of attachment and possessiveness operates through exactly the same biological circuitry. Testosterone is also a key part of this story in the world of hormones. Field researchers studying men in long-term relationships have consistently found lower baseline testosterone levels compared to single men. This pattern has emerged across very different cultures and environments. However, the moment a relationship feels threatened, this baseline level changes completely. It rises even if you don't realize it. The body prepares for conflict without asking for permission. This is not a new mechanism. It's triggered immediately by even something as small as a message left unanswered for 6 hours. None of this operated in isolation from the rest of the group. In small hunter-gatherer communities, everyone knew everyone else. Something called reputation functioned practically like a currency. Anthropologists studying the Jew/Hwantse community in the Kalahari have reported that infidelity rarely remained hidden for long. Betrayal wasn't just a wound between two people, it rippled outward, reshaping alliances, food-sharing arrangements, and who would be invited on the next hunt. Jealousy in that world wasn't an entirely personal emotion, it was a public signal to the entire camp, indicating exactly where the boundaries lay, and what might happen if someone crossed them. Now that you've heard all this, picture that woman standing Arby the fire 50,000 years ago. She watches as another woman's eyes linger a little too long on her partner. She doesn't overreact. She doesn't inherited from hundreds of thousands of years of ancestors who survived. By maintaining their bonds, quietly kicks in those who feel nothing. When their partner drifts away, those who shrug off even the slightest hint of infidelity often spend their lives raising someone else's child. They lose the resources meant for their own children or forfeit their relationships forever. It was much harder for their genes to reach you. Those who felt that sharp, unsettling tightness in their chest, those who paid attention, who reacted, who occasionally caused a scene over a fire that had long since turned to ash, they were the ones whose lineage continued, and over time, their lineage became yours. This never meant that jealousy was something to be chased after, nurtured, or set free. Evolution had developed this emotion to ensure survival in a world where phones, DNA tests, long-distance communication, and world no longer exists. Yet this internal structure remains firmly rooted in place. This raises a question worth pondering. How many of the reactions you've experienced this week are truly related to the present moment? That feeling in your chest when someone you love responds late to a message or doesn't respond at all. The anxiety that stirs within you when you see an unfamiliar name. The thought of scrutinizing something, even just once. And how many of these are borrowed from someone who has never seen a screen, an ancient survival strategy quietly operating against the backdrop of a life for which it was never intended? And perhaps the most unsettling truth is this. You think you're fighting that feeling, but in reality, it's that very feeling that's fighting you. Every ounce of strength, every moment you spend trying to suppress it drives the millennia-old system to expend even more energy to prove you right. There, is only one way to defeat it, to see it not as an enemy, but as an old guardian left behind by your ancestors. Never growl at it, just whisper that it needs to stand guard. I hope what I've said has been etched into a beautiful place in your mind.